Good morning, church. Or should I say good morning to one half of the greatest people in Michigan. It's great to see all your smiling faces. This morning we're going to be looking at Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7 in just a few moments. And we're going to be discussing that word that is central to that text, peace. But in addition, we also have to examine a few other words. The first is as we look at the word safe. This week, my brother from another mother, Jonathan Paulson, and our connection with Jonathan has been, I don't know how many years, 15 years or so. And Jonathan lived with my parents for a few years, and so he kind of became part of the family, and he's been an uncle to our kids. And so you'll see him pop in and out when he's on his adventures from here or there. And Jonathan and I, we like to just talk about everything in the world. And this week we were discussing in the myriad of different topics, dogs. And we played with my dog a little bit. And one of the things that is so intriguing to me about dogs is they're not very complex animals. But they've got some tremendous qualities. Loyalty, love that is unconditional. I mean, they love you when you feed them, and they love you when you don't. But one of the things that's intriguing about our particular dog, and any dog that you have that's what we call crate trained. Anybody ever have a crate trained dog? That means your dog learns to sleep in that small, tight, confined space that we call a crate. And you can lock the door and leave the dog, and everything is good. Now, I don't know about you, but I would go crazy in that tight of a confined space. And my wife, who's claustrophobic and can't even get in an elevator, she would go crazy instantaneously in that tight of a confined space. But here you have a dog that's this big, and it'll live its entire life, sleep every night in a container that's this big. And what's amazing about it is you would kind of understand that if it was just under duress. And certainly for the first few weeks or maybe a month or two, when you're crate training a dog, it is under duress. The dog starts to be forced to stay in the crate. Maybe you'll give it a treat or whatever it may be at the beginning, and that dog will wail, and it will whine, and it will make all sorts of racket, and you'll hear that crate shake. And you'll wonder if there's an intruder in the house. And you'll go down into the laundry room or the basement or wherever that crate is, and it will have scooted all over the room because that dog is doing everything it can to get out. But after time, little by little, that starts to change. To the point that now, my dog, you can kind of get a sense when she's been out too long and she's getting tired. She'll get up and she'll look at you, and then she'll lay back down and look at you some more, just like thinking, when are we going to get up and go to bed? And sure enough, you get up and she looks happy, and she runs down the stairs, and you get her a little treat, and you walk down, and she's already here in the crate, waiting. And what's intriguing about it is particularly that crate becomes a source of safety, especially in the most disconcerting moments. If there's a thunderstorm, I can tell you where a crate-trained dog's going to be every time. Not sleeping at your feet, not sleeping in your lap, not a crate-trained dog. You know where they'll be if there's a thunderstorm and the house is shaking and rain is pounding the roof and that dog doesn't understand and know what's going on and it's afraid. You know where it'll be? In the crate. Because that crate is the one place, it's like a cave for a dog. It's the one place that it has slept soundly night after night after night. And in its very simplistic psyche, that crate is a safe place. And when life is falling apart, when the storms of life beat against us, all we really want, all we yearn for above all else is a safe place. That's what peace really is. Finding the safe place. All of us who've had small children, we understand this. because the safe place for them is different. A child, much like a dog, when you're first making them sleep in their own bed from the crib, it's a little bit of wailing and a little bit of screaming. Not so much moving the bed, but they're moving their lips and their vocal cords, right? And you're having to get up and deal with it and get up and deal with it. But finally you get them trained in the same way, and your kids go to bed and you tuck them in at night, read them a story, whatever your routine is. But then the thunderstorms come. And then comes the safe place, which I call sleep in the middle. Does everybody know what this is? I'm telling you, I've known folks, and this is just my opinion. You can disagree because you don't have to be right all the time. But I've known folks who, even when the thunderstorms come and the house is shaking or there's a bad dream, don't let the kids sleep in the middle. You should. Not all the time, not as a routine, I don't mean that. But you know why they want to sleep in the middle between mom and dad on that rare occasion? Because it's a safe place. It's one place they can go when they're afraid. When they had the dream of the monster chasing them and their little psyche is just rattled. Or when the storm is shaking the house and they don't understand and they don't know. They want to go to the crate. They want to go to the one place where they don't feel that anything in the world can hurt them. And that's in between the two people they know wouldn't let anything hurt them. The safe place. We all, in our heart, yearn for a safe place. And really this text in Philippians chapter 4 and so many others throughout the New Testament, particularly in the words of the Apostle Paul, speak to that safety of true peace. You see, we're a people who are overcome with fears. The entire human race is overcome with fears. Most fears, like those of children, really aren't rooted in anything valid. Most fears are kind of an anxiety over things that are never going to happen. But yet, we still feel as if they're just as real as if we were staring down the barrel of a gun. Think about the fears. Charles Givens, in a book called Super Self, lists the 7 top fears of Americans according to his research. Number 7 is a fear of flying. Well, of late I can sort of understand that a little more. But that's the 7th most common fear. Number 6 is a fear of disease, hypochondria, where people are constantly afraid of something that may be taking place with their body. This one surprised me. Number 5 is a fear of deep water. A fear of just being anywhere where you possibly couldn't touch the bottom if you fell in. Number 4 is a fear of financial disaster. Well, that seems to be a reasonable fear at times. Number 3 is a fear of insects. That one's interesting because also when I observe my dog, I observe much more sensibility on this fear than we have. Because the dog is not afraid of anything smaller than it is. That's just its basic understanding. If I'm bigger than it, I can eat it. Bugs and all, right? But human beings, we're amazing. We can weigh 225 pounds. We're going to say that. We're 225 pounds and be afraid of something that doesn't weigh an ounce. Not an ounce. But yet we are, because we have these irrational fears. The second is the fear of heights. And the first is the fear of public speaking. The number 1 fear of Americans. Now, all of those can be legitimate fears, but oftentimes are not. But it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the fear is real or if the fear is imagined. It has the same emotion, it has the same feeling, and it often has the same paralyzing power. That's what fear does. It paralyzes us. I remember as a boy having We all have our nightmares and the ones that stick with us. And besides the one that involved Scooby-Doo, which was the most occurring one that I had, the other one I had was I would have a gun and I could defend myself, but I wasn't strong enough in my index finger to pull the trigger. What a terrible feeling. But that's the nature of fear. It's paralyzing. It causes you not to do anything, just to sit back and to wallow in the fear. There's a great example of this. Nikita Khrushchev, who through a big portion of the Cold War led the Soviet Union and was one of Stalin's primary generals, particularly at the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II. Nikita Khrushchev, after Stalin's death, he went on a campaign throughout the Soviet Union to malign the name of Stalin. So he would publicly rail against the evils of Stalin and his regime, killing of millions of Soviets and others throughout the world. And what was intriguing is he also was a communist dictator of great evil, I guess you might say. And at one of his rallies, where he's talking so disparagingly about Stalin, some brave soul from the crowd screamed out, "Well, you were one of his closest confidants. Why didn't you do something about it?" To which Khrushchev glared into the crowd and said, "Who said that?" Absolute silence. And after about 2 minutes of silence, he said, "Now you know why. Now you know why." Because fear is a paralyzing thing. Whether it's a real fear or an imagined fear, you see, they didn't know for sure. Khrushchev, he may have answered their question the same had they spoken up. But the fear of what might be caused a person who wanted to speak out to be paralyzed into silence. You see, most fears are based on ignorance rather than fact. Yet we have to admit that some fears are indeed very real. I think about a soldier. As I was in all this travel recently, I saw a lot of soldiers in my travel in uniforms. And I thought about a soldier yearning for home in the trenches on the battlefield. Bullets all around them, and mortars and tanks, and all of the trappings of war, and the constant wondering if today is my last day. Yearning for home. That fear is not imagined, that fear is realized. Even the things that we experience in the normal routine of life, the college student realizing how big and bad the world really is for the first time, and yearning for home. A diagnosed illness, and the doctor gives you odds, but those odds are just a guess. And you yearn to be healthy again. You yearn for things to be the way that they were. And that yearning, see, even though those fears are real, they're not imagined, they're actual. But yet, as the soldier yearns for home, as the college student yearns for their bedroom back wherever it is that they grew up, as the ill person yearns for the time when they were healthy again, every one of them is thinking back and yearning, wishing for the safe place again, for the crate. And what I want to suggest to you is that this text in Philippians chapter 4, 6 through 7, tells us that we have a crate. We have a safe place. We have a place where we can sleep in the middle, if you will. When all the storms of life blow and batter our lives, Paul says that here in Philippians chapter 4, 6 through 7, you can be anxious for nothing. But in everything, with prayer and supplication, thanksgiving and request, make your request known to God, that the peace of God, that the safe place, that your crate, that your place where you can sleep in the middle, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus our Lord. I often reflect on those words, that surpasses all understanding. What does that mean? It doesn't imply that we don't feel safe. It means that it doesn't have to make sense to the outside observer. It doesn't have to logically have all of the puzzle pieces fit together for anyone who observes it. I don't understand it on my simple little dog. Why? I mean, the house could fall in. The crate's not going to do much then, right? But the dog, when she's in the crate, she doesn't think about all the things. It's the crate. Regardless of all the reality of life's challenges, of all of the dangers that are presented, the crate, no matter what's happening, the crate makes her feel safe. We should be a people who understand that life's challenges are real. But when they come and rear their ugly heads, when the dragons roar and spit their flame and threaten our lives, we should realize we have a place we can go that doesn't change the danger, but can help us change how we face the danger. Can give us the safe place. Just 3 brief observations. First of all, the danger is very real. The concerns of people today are not always just the fanciful imaginations of a child. Financial, material stress. Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 6, verse 25 and thereabout, where he talks about, consider the lilies of the field. They grow, they toil not, neither do they spin. Consider the birds of the air who make their nests. How much more so will God take care of you? But the reason Jesus had to say that is because everyone in that time and every time that came before them and in every time since, up to this very moment, realized that financial stress will always be a very, very real fear. It's not imagined, it's real. But in that, he's telling them, take heart because there's a safe place. We look in 1 Samuel chapter 18. In 1 Samuel 18, we see an intriguing text where, of course, we're looking at the life of David. And in verse 23, it says, so Saul's servant spoke those words in the hearing of David. And David says, does it seem to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing I am poor and a lightly esteemed man? Now, this seems like a passing statement, but listen to what he says. He says, does it seem to you like no big deal? I'm a king's son-in-law. And that isn't easy. And family concerns, you're worried about your kids, and some of us, our parents are getting older, and we worry about our parents, and you worry about your spouse. Those family concerns, those are real. They're not imagined. So these problems we face in life, mortality itself, James 4:14, what is your life? It is but a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. I mean, all of us know what it means to grow older. We know what it means to deteriorate. That is a real, measurable fear. And then there's the fear of being alone, of losing companionship. All of those things are not the imaginations of a child. So after all of this, we face the greatest of our fears, and this is what I think really is the greatest fear, is the fear of ourselves. Many of your fears at least are rooted in yourself. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I will fail if I try that. Honestly, how many of people's fears really are fear of themselves? And so all of these, and frankly, sometimes that's a real fear as well. So secondly, we ask this. Jesus came to give man a safety he could not find within himself. Can we find it in ourselves? And the reality is the reason Jesus could do that is he was a man that was different than every other man. In John chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In John chapter 1, verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory, the glory of the one and only from the Father, full of grace and truth. And in that we see that He not only speaks truth, He is truth. And so you see, many of our fears is because we just don't know. We just don't know. The reason we're afraid of sickness is we don't know how it's going to turn out. The reason we're afraid of relationship problems is we just don't know what that person will do. Will they still love me? Will they still be my friend? Will they still... It's always I don't know. I wonder. Fear of ourselves. Can I do it? Am I smart enough? Am I talented enough? It's not knowing. But Jesus never struggled. Now, He struggled. He struggled with temptation like you do. He struggled with even the fear of not wondering what would happen, but knowing what would happen and not wanting to endure that suffering, the anxiety of that. He struggled with the human condition of ailments and pains and backaches and everything that we struggle with. But what He didn't have to deal with, and this is why He is a source of peace and safety, is because Jesus didn't have to wonder why and if. He is truth. So when people came to Him and said, Lord, what should I do? And He said, believe in me. He who believes in me, though he will die, he will live. Jesus didn't say that with a question mark. He said it with absolute certainty. Because He doesn't have to wonder, what if? He knows. He is truth. So when Jesus tells me, well, you're going to face all sorts of temptations and struggles and problems, you realize he was very plain about the fact that life is not always going to be easy. Does everybody get that? Don't blame Jesus when your life is hard. Like, where is He? Where are His promises? Well, why don't you just read what He says? Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and speak all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. But rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. Now here's the thing. Jesus is absolute truth. So if He tells me my life's going to be hard, but if you stick it out, it will be all right. Here's the thing. That's not a question mark. Maybe. Good odds. High percentage chance. No. For great is your reward in heaven. Exclamation point. Never. Question mark. So I read things like this. Yet in all these things, we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us. For I am persuaded. You know what that word means? Question mark? I know. For I am persuaded that neither life nor death, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, neither height, nor depth, nor any other created thing will be able to separate me from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Or I look at promises like this. Those are directly the words of God. Do not be frightened. Don't give in to the fear. Do not be dismayed. Don't doubt yourself. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Question mark? Exclamation point. Because He is truth. The last observation. He came to, therefore, save us from our worst fears and observe and offer a safety like no other. You see, He's even conquered the fear of the unknown. Jesus, in the resurrection, He took the greatest fear that, and we can all admit it, it's every one of our greatest fear. And He went boldly where no man has gone before. And He came back. And the whole premise of 1 Corinthians 15, as he talks about that through Adam will all die, but through Christ all will be made alive. And the last enemy to be put under His feet is death. The whole point of all that is that if Jesus can raise Himself from the dead, then it's no trouble to raise me from the dead. In that we look at so many other passages, Hebrews chapter 2, 14 and 15, where the Hebrew writer plainly says, inasmuch as the children have partaken in flesh and blood, He Himself likewise has shared in the same, that through death He might destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Do you know that you encounter people every day, all day, who are in bondage to the fear of death? You do. You see people at the gym who aren't there working out just to feel better and to look better. Their core motivation many times, not every time, but many times, is fear of death. You see people who, they're not just eating right to feel good and to look good. Those are good motivations. But many times it's subconscious, deep down, maybe I can squeeze in one more year, one more month, one more day. This bondage of the fear of death is the slavery of mankind. And Jesus came to defeat that so we could feel safe, so we could have a crate when life throws everything at us, so we could sleep in the middle. He's equipped us to face our fears, even our fears of what lies beyond the grave. I love the words of Jesus in John 14, 1 through 3. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. But I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again. Question mark? No. Exclamation point. You see, because Jesus has gone to the unknown. That's what fear is. We're only afraid because we don't know. You're afraid when you're sick because you don't know what might happen. You're afraid when the storm blows because you don't know if it'll blow the house. It's all about the unknown. There was a map, it's still in the London Museum, British Museum, and it was penned in 1525, and the cartographer, it shows the coastline of the New World. And in all the unexplored parts, he wrote things like, here be giants. Here be dragons. And years later, one of the expeditionary explorers in the 1800s came in possession of that map. And today it's intriguing because that great explorer who was a man of faith and he was an adventurer. He went into the great unknown. And so he took that map, and now today, that map has lines drawn through all those statements of that original fearful cartographer. Here be giants, here be dragons, scratched through. And over the whole map are the words, here is God. That's the crate. That's sleeping in the middle. To turn to Him in every difficult circumstance of life and realize I can have peace just like that dumb dog can sleep in that crate in the middle of a hurricane and sleep just like nothing was happening. Because of the promises of Jesus, we have peace that surpasses, other people won't understand it, will they? That surpasses understanding. But we have to seek after it. It's available to every believer if we seek after it. It's kind of like this. There was a missionary on the mission field, and he had one of those cars that was provided for him by supporters and ran sometimes it didn't. And what he found is he could never get it to start. So he had the little native kids in the local school, and he'd have them come out in the morning and they'd help him push the car, and he'd pop the clutch and get it started. And then all day, wherever he went, he'd either park on a hill where he could let it roll and pop the clutch, or he'd leave it running. And that went on for the 3 years he was on the mission field. And then he was going back to the States, and another missionary came to replace him. And he was explaining this long procedure to the new missionary of what he had to do and how, you have to always make sure you park on a hill and get the kids in the morning to push you, and you can pop the clutch and then the car will run. And all the while, the new missionary had popped the hood, and he said, "Excuse me, I think the problem is this battery cable. You've just got a bad connection." You see, for all those years, the power was there. He just wasn't connecting to it. So here's the thing. I don't know what you're afraid of. I don't know if it's silly things like sharks and elevators and insects and those kind of public speaking. I don't know if it's real. Maybe you've got a diagnosis that terrifies you. Perhaps your kids break your heart and you don't know what's going to happen with them. Those are real fears. But you've been given a crate. But you have to, just like our children had to, when the storms would rage, they had to get out of bed and they had to brave, because they weren't supposed to get out of bed. They had to brave a little bit and come in the room, and you'd hear the little rap on the door. "Mama, Daddy, please. Please. Can I sleep in the middle?" If you seek after Him, if you have the connection, there is safety in Jesus. If you need to come today for any reason, if you are overcome with fear, you are not alone. Everybody in here, we're all in the same boat on that. Everybody here has had it, living it now, or will live it in the future. This is a place where you can respond and be encouraged, be uplifted, never be judged. Come right now as we stand and as we sing.